Waiter insulted Melania Trump in a luxury restaurant. The owner's reaction leaves everyone stunned. Imagine this: a high-end luxury restaurant known for its exceptional service and celebrity clientele suddenly becomes the backdrop for a shocking moment that no one expected. The evening starts just like any other: luxurious ambience, elegant attire, and the hum of conversation filling the air. But when a familiar face walks through the door, everything changes. That face: Melania Trump, the former First Lady, known for her grace, beauty, and poise. A figure used to the spotlight, surrounded by a constant media buzz. But on this night, she's not the one making waves. It's a waiter, a man who should have known better than to cross the line of professionalism. What happens next is nothing short of jaw-dropping. The tension builds quickly as the waiter, for reasons unknown, decides to insult Melania Trump in front of the entire dining room. A remark so out of place, so rude, it causes the room to freeze. People start to look around in disbelief, unsure if they've heard what they think they've heard. How could someone working in a place so prestigious be so bold, so reckless? The whispers start, and everyone in the room is asking the same question: why? Why would anyone dare to insult a high-profile guest like that? As the tension mounts, the focus shifts from the insult to the restaurant owner, a figure who commands respect and has built a reputation for maintaining the highest standards in hospitality. What will he do? Will he stand by his employee, or will he take action that no one could have predicted? The owner's response is a moment of utter shock. It's not what anyone expects, not even the waiter himself. In a twist that leaves the entire restaurant stunned, the owner does something that turns the situation completely on its head. What happens next is a game changer, setting the stage for a story that will have everyone talking for days. But what led up to this? What is the real story behind this shocking encounter? Was it just a moment of poor judgment, or is there more to it than meets the eye? Stick around, because the full story is about to unfold, and trust me, you won't want to miss a second of it. The restaurant where this shocking incident took place wasn't just any high-end dining establishment. It was an icon. Known for its exclusivity, the place had built a reputation not just on food, but on the careful balance of elegance and celebrity culture. Over the years, it had become a favorite among politicians, A-list actors, business moguls, and dignitaries from across the globe. Its staff were highly trained, and every inch of the dining experience was tailored to perfection. But with that level of prestige came pressure, a pressure to maintain an image at all costs, to never let a single misstep go unnoticed. On this particular evening, the tension was palpable. The restaurant was packed. It was one of those nights where the rich and famous came together under the dim glow of chandeliers, casually discussing business, life, and everything in between. Yet amidst the soft clinking of glasses and the quiet laughter of wealthy patrons, there was something brewing beneath the surface, a growing sense that something just wasn't right. It started with the waiter. Daniel was young, ambitious, and full of energy. He'd been working at the restaurant for about a year, rising through the ranks, and had always dreamed of making it big in the hospitality industry. He wanted to be noticed, to impress, and to climb higher. But in his pursuit of attention, he was beginning to forget the very principles that had brought him success: respect, professionalism, and discretion. When Melania Trump entered the restaurant that night, the room grew quiet. She was, of course, accustomed to such reactions. As a former First Lady, she was always under the watchful eye of the public, and her presence alone could shift the atmosphere in a room. But that didn't seem to matter to Daniel. He was aware of who she was, of course, but in his mind, she was just another guest. And that was his first mistake. You see, there's an unspoken rule in the world of fine dining. You don't treat your guests as anything less than royalty. Every patron, whether famous or not, deserved the same level of respect and attentiveness. But Daniel, driven by a strange mix of arrogance and youthful ignorance, allowed his personal opinions about the former First Lady to cloud his judgment. Maybe it was the media portrayals of her, maybe it was something deeper, resentment or disdain, but he made the fateful decision to let his feelings show. It wasn't overt at first. A little smirk here, a sarcastic comment there, and it all started to build. The first slight was small, almost unnoticeable. Melania had asked for her wine glass to be refilled. Daniel, his back turned, made a show of taking his time. When he finally returned with the bottle, his movement was exaggerated, a sense of impatience oozing from his every step. He poured the wine just a little too quickly, splashing some onto the table, then gave her a knowing, almost mocking smile as he pulled away. Melania raised an eyebrow, clearly uncomfortable, but instead of addressing it directly, she simply gave a polite nod and returned her attention to the conversation at her table. The tension, however, hadn't dissipated. If anything, it had only started to grow. Then came the remark. It was during the main course, a delicate dish served with expert precision. The conversation had shifted to politics, something Melania had long been associated with, but she rarely engaged in. Still, she sat quietly listening. That was when Daniel, as he cleared her plate, leaned in and made a comment under his breath. Something personal, something cutting, something that felt like an intentional jab. The words were soft, but they were meant to be heard. It must be nice, living in a world where nothing ever feels real. His tone was mocking, dismissive. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Melania's expression hardened. Her eyes, once calm and collected, now narrowed ever so slightly. She didn't react immediately, not with anger, but with a quiet shock. She wasn't the kind of person who made a scene. But in that moment, Daniel had crossed a line that was impossible to ignore. The room grew unnaturally quiet, the atmosphere suddenly thick with unease. The other diners, sensing something was wrong, glanced over at the scene unfolding. Whispers spread quickly like wildfire, and every eye in the restaurant was on the two of them. But it wasn't just Melania who felt the weight of the moment. Daniel, standing there awkwardly, had no idea how badly he had misjudged the situation. He thought he was being clever, playing on her persona, but instead, he had sparked something much larger than he could comprehend. It was at that moment that the owner of the restaurant, Anton Leclerc, who had been overseeing the dining room from a distance, caught wind of what had just happened. Anton was known for his sharp eye and his commitment to maintaining the reputation of his establishment. A man who had spent decades building this restaurant from the ground up, he was not one to tolerate anything that could damage his carefully crafted image. When he walked over, his steps were deliberate, his face unreadable. He didn't say a word to Daniel at first. Instead, he focused solely on Melania, offering her a warm, apologetic smile. "Please, madam, I hope everything is to your satisfaction this evening. If there's anything we can do, anything at all, don't hesitate to let me know." Melania, ever the epitome of grace, simply nodded. "Thank you. Everything is fine," she replied, though her voice betrayed a hint of tension. It was clear, however, that she wasn't going to escalate the matter. She was done with it. But Anton wasn't. As he turned toward Daniel, the room seemed to hold its breath. It was then that the true drama began to unfold. What Anton did next wasn't just a reaction. It was a moment that would leave everyone in that restaurant speechless. Was he about to fire Daniel on the spot? Would he confront him publicly and make an example of him? No one could be sure, but what was about to happen was something no one could have predicted. As the seconds dragged on, the fate of both Daniel and the restaurant itself hung in the balance. The next move was crucial, and it was coming fast. Stay tuned, because the way Anton handled this situation would leave everyone questioning the power of reputation and the lengths one man would go to protect it. The tension in the restaurant was unbearable. As Anton Leclerc, the owner, stood there staring down at Daniel, no one could quite figure out what he was thinking. The room fell into an eerie silence, as if every single person in that restaurant was holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable to unfold. The waiter's face was flushed with embarrassment, his eyes darting nervously, unsure of how things would turn out. Melania, sitting calmly at her table, seemed untouched on the surface, but those around her could sense the unease lingering in the air. Anton took a slow, deliberate step toward Daniel, his gaze never wavering. It felt as though the entire room was frozen in time, waiting for the verdict to be handed down. The owner paused for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. No one could have expected what happened next. Instead of the harsh reprimand or instant firing that everyone had anticipated, Anton did something that completely disarmed the room. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, his expression unreadable. Then, in a calm but firm voice, he spoke. "You don't disrespect guests here, especially not in my restaurant. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded, his voice barely audible. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry." But Anton wasn't done. He turned to address the entire dining room, the diners who had been witnesses to this uncomfortable moment. "This is not just a restaurant. It's a place where people come for respect, for an experience of excellence," he continued. "I've worked my entire life to make sure this is a sanctuary for those who choose to spend their evening here. And I will not let anyone, including my staff, tarnish that reputation." The room was still, but then Anton did something truly unexpected. Instead of firing Daniel on the spot, instead of letting the situation spiral further, he offered a rare chance for redemption. "Tonight, I'll give you a second chance, Daniel," Anton said. "But this behavior ends here, and if you ever disrespect a guest again, you won't get a third chance." The contrast between what everyone had expected and what Anton actually did was staggering. The crowd, which had been holding its breath, let out a collective exhale. It was a bold move, one that stunned everyone in the room, especially Daniel. The tension that had once filled the restaurant slowly dissipated, replaced with a sense of relief. Anton wasn't just protecting his brand, he was showing mercy, teaching a lesson in humility and respect. In a world where power and influence often meant the final word, Anton's decision was a reminder that integrity and second chances mattered most. Daniel, still in shock, mouthed a quiet "thank you" before scurrying back to his duties, visibly chastened. Melania, who had been a silent observer throughout the ordeal, gave a small, approving nod toward Anton. It was a gesture that spoke volumes about how she viewed the situation. She respected his decision, and in a way, it seemed as though the entire restaurant now respected him even more for handling the crisis with such grace. As the evening continued, the energy in the room shifted. The incident, while shocking, became a reminder of the importance of hospitality, professionalism, and respect, values that Anton had spent years building his reputation around. For Melania, this was just another moment in her life where she could see firsthand how people responded when faced with an uncomfortable situation. For Daniel, it was a wake-up call, a reminder that sometimes the most valuable lesson comes not from being punished, but from being given the chance to learn and grow. In the end, the night continued without further incident. The diners enjoyed their meals, the soft clinking of glasses once again filling the air, and the hum of conversation returned to its usual flow. But for everyone who witnessed what had unfolded, the memory of that moment lingered in the air, reminding them of the power of dignity, the weight of actions, and the rare but invaluable gift of second chances. Anton's reputation as a businessman who valued integrity over instant gratification only grew that night. It wasn't just about running a successful restaurant, it was about creating an environment where respect was the foundation. As for Daniel, he would never forget the lesson he learned that night, not from harsh punishment, but from the grace and wisdom of his boss. And Melania, she left the restaurant that night with a quiet sense of satisfaction, knowing that respect and dignity, when upheld, can change the course of a story and the lives involved. The restaurant would go on to host many more high-profile guests, but this night, this moment, would always stand as a reminder of what it truly means to treat others with respect, no matter who they are. And though the drama had ended, the lesson it imparted would echo far beyond those walls, leaving everyone with something to reflect on as they moved forward in their own lives.